Hello, and welcome to Sounds Heal Podcast. I am your host, Natalie Brown, and thank you so much for joining me as we continue to explore the fields of sound healing, sound therapy, and generally the use of sound for health and wellness. Today, our guests are authors Julie Afsahi and Jessica Cross, who are leaders in the yoga teaching and sound healing community in Austin, Texas, in the United States. They've released this book, Seasons of Sound, and we explore some of the concepts discussed in this book, really a resource for new practitioners and seasoned practitioners. And the book draws on inspiration from the four seasons, as well as Om, the practice of Om, and goes into explorations of the foundational use of sound as a practitioner, building your own personal practice, and gives you guidance if you're going to be offering sound baths as well. So it really is a reference for both home and public use of sound, as well as aspects of trauma-sensitive sound bath practices and tools. The section on seasons of sound has a lot of things that you could use: mudras, affirmations, journal prompts, guided meditations, and sound practices. So this could be really a resource for you to use. So we have a discussion about the book, but we also really go in depth more on the mindful use of sound, the current field of sound healing, and have a nice conversation. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Julie and Jessica. This podcast is sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa, located in Sarasota, Florida. The Om Shop is the country's largest showroom of vibrational tools, including crystal bowls, gongs, tuning forks, drums, and so many custom instruments of high quality as well. They can really be a resource if you're looking for something specific, and so you can reach out to them at theomshop.com or give them a call. They also offer trainings and in-person workshops. They also have a luxury spa there in Sarasota if you're able to make it there in person. So thank you so much to the Om Shop for their support and sponsorship. And I hope you enjoy this episode exploring the seasons of sound with Julie and Jessica. All right, well, I want to welcome Julie and Jessica, the authors of Seasons of Sound, here to the episode. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
And why don't we start with a little background, if each of you could just introduce yourselves and perhaps, the things that led you into the yoga and sound healing world. Julie, do you want to start first?
Sure. Thanks so much again for having us. It's so amazing and wonderful to be here and spend time with both of you, actually. So I'm Julie, and I own a yoga studio in Round Rock, which is a suburb of Austin, Texas. And we're about 6.5 years old. And since the first couple of months of us opening, Jessica, who's on this podcast with us today, has been teaching, and she was the first to bring sound healing to our studio. And it's just become such an essential part of our community, to the point that she and I ended up writing a book together, Seasons of Sound. We have sound offerings throughout many of our classes, lots of events, retreats. And I'm sure we'll talk more too today, but we've really entered the training space as well. So it's kind of funny, the suburb of Austin has become this little sound healing hub, but I'm so happy to be a small part of it.
Wonderful. Yeah, how about you, Jessica? What led you into this work and this world?
Oh, thanks for the question. And again, thanks again for having us. It's a pleasure to be here. So, I grew up as a musician, and I moved away from the work as I moved into college, thinking that it wouldn't be something that served me. And I found myself in a very tough spot, working a lot of hours in a corporate position, traveling a ton, and incredibly stressed out, and looked to resources to support myself for which my foray was into yoga. And I, landed in a yoga class on a mental health off day on a Friday. And the teacher was singing a bowl, and it absolutely changed my life. It made me want to know everything and return honestly to, my roots, to understand myself better. And not only that, but to share the wisdom with everybody. So it's been a lot of fun.
Right, right. That's beautiful. Yeah, I find that a lot of people, initially discover this for their own self-care and transformation and, a lot of stress reduction. And then once they realize the massive benefits, whether it's yoga, energy work, sound healing, they just have to share it with everybody else. So it's a common purpose, echoed widely, isn't it? Yeah. So, okay, well, how did you two decide to collaborate, and what was the inspiration for the book?
Yeah, it's I think it's like a long time coming. Jessica and I work together a lot in the world of yoga and meditation and offering trainings for people becoming yoga teachers or taking deeper dives into mindfulness meditation. And she started offering sound healing trainings through her own business, Sound for Stress, and then through my studio, Soul Strong. And I'm just going to put it on Jessica. All of us through her trainings kept telling her, just write a book. Like, this is enough for a book. Just write a book. In podcasts and interviews, she oftentimes says, like, people were asking us, but no, they were asking Jessica. They were like, write a book, write a book. So, and she also has so much knowledge too of restorative yoga and is trained with Judith Lassiter. So that kind of integration of sound, but also really from this perspective of making the client as relaxed and as comfortable to kind of enter this state of healing. So part of, somehow I got wrapped into it and was so happy to be part of it all. And yeah, just we went for it and just had such a blast, honestly, writing it. We had a tight timeline due to our training schedule, and we wanted to have it done for an upcoming training. But really, it's just like given us a little taste of working and publishing together. And I just hope that we have many, many more projects ahead of us because we had just such a good time.
I'm giggling over here because that's such a kind thing to say. Julie, the book wouldn't exist without Julie. It's 100% true. She's being a little demure, but her expertise and incredible wisdom, and specifically into the gong and the trauma informed healing spaces, as well as she's an incredible writer, and she's the best to work with. So I feel very lucky that I get to partner with her, and I feel like we made magic with Seasons of Sound, and I agree. I hope that we get the opportunity to continue to co-create.
Absolutely. And it's quite an undertaking to write a book, whether you have two people or one. But if you have, working together, you can really kind of encourage each other and bounce ideas off each other. Yeah, I want to mention something really great about the book is the trauma sensitivity, the inclusion there, that section. I was like, yeah, gosh, I mean, people are finally starting to talk about that. And what I want to mention is something that you said, Julie, and then Jessica, you just kind of mentioned it as well, is choices. Sometimes people come to sound healing, a sound bath for the first time, and they really don't know what to expect, or maybe the person that guides them in says, this is what we do. And so maybe, do you want to mention some of the ideas or tools that you think are important when it comes to trauma sensitivity?
Absolutely. I love, Natalie, how you brought up choice, and that's just such an important, essential part of trauma-informed teaching, trauma-informed offerings, sound baths, meditation. And it's so simple. It's really empowering people to know they're not stuck in any one position. They're welcome to move. We do introduce our instruments before playing because our hope is that we can get people into a more relaxed, receptive state than when they arrived. And part of that is just not surprising people, offering predictability. So saying this is what here's a sampling of the bowls and of the gong and of the chimes or whatever instruments we have, so that it's not a surprise. Someone isn't new to sound healing. Maybe they came with a friend and the entire time are stressed looking at the gong, like, what is this going to sound like? But instead, they already know, and they know a bit about the layout of the sound bath, as well as very, very, very simple things like where additional props are, how to get an eye towel, where hot tea and water is in our studio and bathrooms. Because what we're asking of people, and really the intention behind the sound bath, is to enter a deepened state of relaxation, activating the parasympathetic nervous system. And one of the key ways to do that is just to not roll out a bunch of surprises. Like, very simple in our approach.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think that, the more that people are offering, they kind of forget those basics, kind of the beginner's mind, that there might always be somebody that's never experienced it before at a sound bath. So comfort, safety, just setting that up is super easy, but massively important for people to have a beneficial experience, right?
100%. Yeah, I kind of want to add to what Julie was saying about the surprise piece is, and maybe you see this, Natalie, as a sound healing practitioner trainer. There seems to be this idea of surprise, where it's like, I don't want to ruin any of the surprises of this amazing offering that we have in store for you. But it's, as we're learning, and as you were just saying, kind of creating the space where people aren't, kind of taken aback, especially when they're new and we want them to come back. We want them to feel comfortable enough to, fall asleep or rest in any way, and then return as many times or as often as they would like.
Yeah, absolutely. I think anything that could be surprising or startling or jarring, is actually the opposite direction that we want to go in. So yeah, I thought that was so great that you included that section in your book. So thanks for that. And let's go a bit more into kind of the main theme, seasons of sound. What was your ideas there? And let's kind of explore how you infuse the four seasons of nature as well as Om into that section of the book.
So I'll start. This is Julie. You know, I had talked with a dear friend of mine who's a yoga therapist, and she was talking a lot about how logical it is to sequence yoga classes using the 4 parts of Om. And then we just got to talking more and more, and then Jessica and I were talking too, and then about how that same type of, it reminds me of like a plot chart in a way. Maybe it's because I was a school teacher before, but it reminds me a bit of that. Is a similar cadence to a sound bath as well, like this opening state, this dreamy middle state, and then slowing down, coming to a close, and then the silence, which is the integration of the practice. And then the more we talked about it too, we started seeing this beautiful parallel between these 4 pieces of Om and the seasons of earth and the seasonality of life as well. So let's say perhaps like you live in a place like Iceland, or you live by the equator, maybe the seasons are a bit different, but we really, we're taking it more too as a metaphor of the natural pace of life and the rhythms of life, the seasons of our life. And also, since writing the book too, I've noticed too this way of organizing nature with Om. It really is so broad and applicable to so many things. So in sound healing, obviously we talk a lot about brainwave states, and if you practice yoga nidra or use sound healing in yoga nidra, slowing down the thoughts in the mind, I was like, the structure of Om is also applicable to the brainwave states and understanding so many other things. So I'm actually very excited about this whole structure of Om and understanding the world around us and the ancient wisdom of Om. And so I think that we just picked one lens that you can use in sound healing, but I think there's many, many applications that I hope others share who are listening. using Om as a lens to view the natural world and sound is, I think we just touched a little on it, and I hope to expand more.
Jessica, do you want to add to that at all?
Yeah, I love what Julie had to say. And, I was thinking about, maybe this time last year when we were putting the structure of the book together and really determining how we wanted to organize. And there were so many, there's so many different ways to organize information. And, if you're a sound healer, hello, if you're listening, there's tons of different books and different certifications and resources out there that sort of say the same thing. And we really wanted to offer something fresh, but also applicable. As Julie was saying too, just like the seasonality of the seasons, earth seasons, also with life, it makes so much sense. And we really wanted to offer a way for a personal practice to be sequenced for the individual as well, be it if it's, the dead of summer here in Austin, Texas, and you may be feeling a little bit more winter in your life as you're approaching the next cycle. You can bring in and customize the practice in whichever way you choose. And ultimately, that's our goal, is our folks have access to this at home and to make it as approachable as possible.
Yeah, that's great. And just so listeners know that haven't read the book yet, the seasons, the parts, the chapters on the seasons really help you sink into the particular season you're in. For example, summer, there's a mudra, there's an affirmation, there's journal prompts, guided meditation. So you can actually like live the seasons, be the seasons, and let that kind of support your practice, but maybe even give you ideas if you're a sound practitioner for what you might offer for a sound bath, right? I mean, it's really a kind of personal, but also could be an offering as well.
Jess and I think because we've, been in this teaching space for a while now, really see things in a practical light as well. We wanted a book that people, whether or not it's based on a home practice, so perhaps you've like recently purchased a chime or a singing bowl and you're wondering, okay, what can I do with this rather than it become home decor? Like, how can I integrate this into my meditation practice or my affirmation practice, like you said? So we wanted it to be practical on that level, but then also for those of us looking for new ideas for theming sound baths, for ways to play for other people. It just seems so logical to bring in the seasons. And then Jess and I too, both have practiced yoga for a long time. So we thought it would be beautiful to also integrate guided meditation, mudra, affirmations. And as someone who's aspiring to be better at journaling, we included journaling prompts as well.
So
Yeah, we
relatable.
all try. Yeah, we all try, right? Comes and
I was
goes.
much better as a teenager than I am as a 44-year-old at journaling.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was going to say, we're kind of talking about the mindful use of sound as a practice. We're in such a dense time, such a multitasking time. So what kind of practices, maybe when it comes to sound, do you think would be really beneficial to people right now, perhaps in their home for themselves?
Oh, I love this question so much. I think, one of the things we talk about are the different modalities in sound, of which we barely touch upon because there are so many. But one of the ones that we have that's incredibly accessible, you don't need to make a purchase, is you have your own voice. And, at home or in the car or, even before you step into the meeting room and in your office, it's simply humming to yourself in a very calm, even quiet manner, just so you feel the vibration internally, can be really powerful and accessible, all the way up to chanting Om or additional mantras that may feel supportive to you. I really like the use of voice. Other opportunities too, if you are interested, and I know many people who listen to your podcast are sound healers or are interested in sound healing. So it's hard not to collect all the things. But we like to keep it simple. You don't need an entire set of crystal bowls, or multiple gongs or harmonium, or whatever it is that you maybe see on Instagram in order to access the practice. It can be a simple chime. It could be a small singing bowl that fits in your bag or sits in your car for your lunch break. However it feels most accessible. You don't need to spend a lot of time or resources to access the practice.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think as people get into this work, they're very excited. They want all the beautiful tools, and it's great to have access to them. But actually, what perhaps we're needing is more simplicity, so which is less, maybe just using a few of your bowls rather than all of them at the same time. And I think as people get more into the practice, they discover that like let's just work with this gong today and just play it for myself, meditate with a gong for myself. So yeah, I do resonate with buying all the things and then and then just keeping it simple after you really get into it. Yeah, another question kind of along that line, as people are getting into this work, I mean, the sound healing field is booming. It's really blossoming right now. It's not just a trend, it's a need. And so I just kind of wonder, as you've been exploring this with people, what do you think is important to be aware of as people? I think, you try to help dispel kind of misconceptions and things like that. What do you think is important as people are starting to dive in to this field for them to know?
I think it really ties well to the train of thought that you both shared a moment ago, but just the simplicity of it all. I think Jessica and I, both have musical backgrounds. Um, we coincidentally both played the flute for much of our lives. And I see too, one of my kids is 16 now and classical pianist. And I don't even know if he has an awareness too of how in sync his body is with the music, if that makes sense. I think sometimes if we're trained in music, the healing component of sound, we don't even have much of an awareness of. So what I think I'm trying to say is, regardless of what your background is, whether you are musically trained or not musically trained, sound healing is easily accessible to all. You don't need to have studied music theory to play a singing bowl. So I think part of what we do and the work that Jess and I do too is helping people to understand that many of these sound healing tools were created to be accessible to large groups of people, which is perhaps too why sound healing is really taking off. I've seen a huge change over the past few years with the number of yoga teachers, for example. Even I took a Buddhist meditation program. There's more integration of sound in that arena as well as working now with military communities and trauma-informed yoga. There's bigger sound integration happening there too, which everything they like to do, is typically research-based if it's getting funding for the VA. So that's very cool too. So I think what I'm just trying to say is I want people to understand that it's accessible to them. They don't have to have a musical background. Like, I hesitate to even share that part, of my own story, because I think really sound healing is meant to be accessible, similar to how we've always evolved with sound, chanting, singing, humming, playing drums. We've been around forever.
That's a really great point. I think that is a really good point, that some people might initially be concerned that, oh, well, I don't really have a musical background, or I don't understand musical theory, or whatever it may be. But you know what? We're all affected by music. We use certain music to affect how we feel, listen to certain things to motivate us, listen to certain things to relax us. We're already all using music in that way. And that's really what this is using sounds for health and wellness, right? And I think you're absolutely right that, in my experience, if you're a musician getting into this work, you might actually be analyzing what you're doing a little bit initially, right? You're kind of in that skill mindset, technique mindset. But if you don't have musical experience, it's going to be perhaps more intuitive, like why, what am I trying to express, or what energy am I trying to move? So there's a benefit to both, but definitely no exclusion at all wherever you come from. So yeah, that's a really great point, Julie. Thanks for saying that. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Jessica, just on people just diving into this field? I'm sure you work with a lot of people that are just coming into this. What do you think is important for them to know as they jump in?
Oh, this is, I feel like we could go on and on about this one. This is a good question. I think I love what we were just unpacking about the misconception of needing some sort of experience or a musical background to get started. That's a very common question. And I would say one we get all of the time. I think another one too is, from a resource perspective, which we were kind of unpacking just a minute ago, do I need to own, X, Y, and Z in order to get started? And we always say no. We 100% encourage people to start exactly where they are and enjoy the training and, decide. I actually think those that do that, where they approach the training without trying to collect all the instruments, right before or right after, even do better, because it's more integrated than it is almost seeking. I feel like there's like this collection that feels like progress when we're collecting all the instruments and we start stacking them stacking them high in your room, and you start to see a visual change, but it's not an integrated part of your practice yet. You don't step over to your gong or your singing bowl or your instrument of choice in the morning and even spend 60 seconds checking in with the sound. How does it sound? How do you feel today? Those really simple integration tips that we find essential and share in our trainings. I find that that's another big misconception, is that there just needs to be a massive resource unload in order to get started, and it's just not true.
That's a great point too, right? Yeah. Get to know your instruments, spend time with them, be curious, be playful. How does this one make me feel today? And how can I help regulate myself with this tool today? Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And just spending time getting to know your instruments, the language of the instruments, what they're expressing, and how they're shifting how you feel, can be a beautiful practice, but I think can also enhance what you're offering to other people. So yeah, excellent points on that. So I'm curious, now that the book is out in the world and we're sharing about it, Julie, you said a little while ago that you're so glad that you decided to go with a certain structure with Ohm, and that you can kind of see a vision of maybe what could happen next with it. So, my kind of question is, what is next? What curiosity is coming forth? What's the next step for either of you, both of you, with the projects you're working on?
Oh gosh, there's a lot. I think with this book, each component of it I can see being its own project, from just the small amount of science that we include in the book, and how that is constantly growing and evolving. I could see that piece alone being expanded into its own book, as well as, I was joking a lot about journaling before, but I could see to those pieces being expanded as well. I've noticed too, just in my own circle of friends, kind of in the meditation yoga world, so many people are using guided journaling to help them in just creating a more mindful awareness as they move through the day. So I could see that being another project, or also just breaking apart the seasons a bit more and creating those as their own containers and projects. So there's so much. I mean, really, it's limitless. But honestly, Natalie, too, I'm like so inspired by the work that you're doing in your podcast as well. It just shows um, how everything is in constant growth in sound healing. Um, so, like, where I'm thinking now is very different than even a year ago, just based on how the whole community is changing and growing, and the science is growing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I find it's one of those collective things that is happening. Like you have an idea, and because there's this collective shift happening, if you don't get to it, you see that somebody else is doing it, or it's already out there. And I don't mean that in a bad way at all. I mean, like, there's this shift in awareness that is really rising. And you were saying each of those sections could be put out in more depth. I think so with the trauma sensitivity too, right? That could be a whole project that you release, or a class, or something like that. Yeah, what do you think, Jessica? What's the next step besides what Julie was saying?
Oh, we dream up constantly of all the things. We have lots of irons in the fire as well too. Our sound healing certifications here in Texas are expanding, which is wonderful, and we're honestly humbled to be a resource for practitioners. It's truly an absolute joy. We're starting to travel those trainings and expand there, and I'm seeing, in my personal business, Sound for Stress, I'm seeing more corporate interest, which has been really interesting, I guess. Interesting. But over, this last 7 years, just we were saying in the past few years, the shift has been massive. And, big corporations are interested and curious in the practice, and, bringing it in-house and wanting workshops and wanting regular classes to support their employee base and beyond, which I find incredible, because it's a very full circle moment for me, coming from my corporate background back into being the one who's offering the sound. It's pretty amazing. So I'm really excited about that. I think the more folks that we have with the tools, the better. As you were saying, it's sometimes you see the idea that you had, and the collective has already begun spinning towards that direction. You're like, oh, well, there that goes. But it's good, because the more people that know about sound, the better for them, the better for us, and who knows, what things will look like this time next year.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good point. And yeah, I think that's right. That's another thing to mention to people that are getting into this. If it seems like, oh, well, there's just so many people getting into this, there's also that many more that need this, whether it's corporate or schools or nursing homes, or like, it really is limitless. So the encouragement of, yes, get into this field, you will find your special place, and it's so needed. I think it can really have an impact on a large scale as people get into this. Yeah. Yeah.
One arena too, I have a neuromuscular disease myself, and even today I spent like 4 hours of my day at the hospital, because I get infusion treatment 5 days a month. And even when I was there, when I rolled in, the nurses are all like joking with me. They're like, do you think sometime you could just like teach a yoga class on the floor, like before your infusion, Julie? And I was like laughing. But there is so much truth to that from the patients like myself that are dealing with chronic illness, and perhaps like chronic pain, chronic fatigue, all of these things. That's one of the major reasons I've been drawn to sound myself, but as well as like the people working in those spaces having to deal with us and insurance and everything else. They're pretty stressed out. So the nurses on my floor, they joke around with me a lot about yoga and meditation. And there's a lot of jokes on the floor too, like when something happens afterwards, like a nurse will run over and be like, Julie, can you just take a few deep breaths with me? And it's all, in jest, but at the same time, there's always an element of seriousness to it too. Like, what we're all dealing with is incredibly stressful, from the people at the hospital to myself. And I think because I'm so close to it, I don't always see the need because I'm in it, but really like, oh my gosh, people living with chronic illness, chronic health issues. I think I could do a lot for my own community. So just like you said, I always say this too with training yoga teachers, and meditation teachers too, is like, these are not, I don't mean to use the word market, but it's not like a saturated market. Like these healing modalities that we're all being trained in and hoping to offer communities, that just doesn't exist. Like there just isn't a saturated market for sound healing or any of these wonderful healing modalities. So it's like the sky's the limit. There's so many communities in need. We just had someone too contact Jessica, who recently took one of our sound trainings, and now she's offering sound baths in women's prisons. And so she just had her first sound bath that was offered and was so excited about how well it went and how well it was received. So really, like, there's unlimited populations of people who might find like greater ease,
Yeah.
greater wellness with sound.
That's right. That's right. And I'm so glad you said that about there is no oversaturation. Really, the question is, who do you want to help? Because there's only one of each of us. So we need more sound healers getting into this so we can help as many people and really have a ripple effect with this work. And those are really beautiful things you mentioned with the women's prison, of course, hospitals, and not only the patients, but you're right, staff, caretakers. I mean, think about just the pressure that those people are under. Yeah. Everyone needs it, right?
Absolutely.
One day, the singing bowl, the gong will be the folk instrument of America. Everyone's going to have one in their home, right? Maybe someday.
Someday, yeah.
Everyone will have one. But like you said earlier, Jessica, we all have our voice. So that's a great place to start with showing people these tools, is humming, using Om or whatever it is, can create such a shift. And it changes your breathing just automatically. It helps, slow you down, just the practice of humming. So yeah. Well, fantastic. Anything we didn't cover? I definitely want you to share how people can find what you're doing, the book, your trainings, but anything else that you want to leave us with?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you for being you, for sharing your voice on the podcast, for hosting folks like Julie and myself, and an amazing cast of sound healers and other folks in the modality. I was so impressed to listen to your episodes, and I'm excited to hear more. And I hope that you have fun things coming up too that we can be in the know about it and participate in. And we're just so glad to be connected and grateful for everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Jessica. Yeah, it's just as fun for me to connect with people and see all the perspectives that are out there. Yeah.
It's such a pleasure to be here. And just like Jessica said, to be connected. Natalie, your question is like, my brain right now is just nonstop. Like, what's next? I'm so excited for all of us, like all of us listening, all of us here on the podcast. I think that's what's so exciting about sound healing is it's just the beginning, so it's really exciting. And you can find our book, Seasons of Sound, at seasonsofsoundbook.com or on Amazon, as well as my yoga studio, Soul Strong Yoga. If you're ever in the Austin area, we would love to have you. You can find also our upcoming sound trainings and events too at Soul Strong Yoga. Jessica, do you have something to add to that too?
Yeah, you can always find me at Soul Strong Yoga because it's one of my very favorite places to be. But you can find me at soundforstress.com and also on all the platforms. So I love to connect with folks in the DMs too. So if anyone ever has any questions or is curious about sound, always feel free to reach out.
Wonderful. Thank you both for really stepping onto this path and being inspirations to other and bringing this to your community and beyond. It's really been a pleasure to connect with you. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for tuning into this 5-year anniversary episode of Sounds Heal Podcast, sponsored by the Om Shop and Spa. You can keep up to date with what's coming up next at soundshealstudio.com. You can follow and check out things at Facebook, Sounds Heal Studio, Instagram at Natalie Brown, Sounds Heal, on YouTube, on the Sounds Heal Studio channel. And thanks again for supporting this podcast. Be well and stay tuned.